Now, where did I put it? Here it is. Welcome to the Toolbox. Tools for life and everything in between. Stuff you can use or toss, it's up to you. Howdy everybody, welcome back. This is episode 20 and I have a very special guest on episode 20. I can't wait because I'm very excited. I'm tingling. So let's get right into this. Who are you and what is your military background?
Hey, I'm Gardner. I am a father and a husband and a retired Navy SEAL. I spent 30 years in the SEAL team, served at every level of enlisted leadership and several levels of executive leadership as an enlisted guy. I made it to the rank of E9, which in Navy is a Master Chief. So I guess the Army equivalent of that would be like a Sergeant Major. I was the SEAL Team 5 Command Master Chief and our training detachment's Command Master Chief right before I retired 2 years ago. And now I work for Jocko Willink at his company Echelon Front, and we solve problems through leadership.
Which is fantastic.
Even if you're not leading other people, you're still leading. Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've after reading Extreme Ownership the first time, I started to realize all of the mistakes that I had made through my initial foray into leadership, and it was like black and white. And as he says all the time, when you see the way broadly, you see it in all things. And as soon as I recognized my mistakes there, I was realizing what I was doing wrong, not only in when I was in the military, but afterwards, and dealing with nonprofits and being a father and all these things. It all just ties into each other, and it's leadership is so key. So how long have you been retired and at Echelon Front? Because you made the switch like immediately, right? Like you retired and then jumped in with Jocko.
I let's see. I retired on a Wednesday, and Wednesday the following week I was doing my first leadership instruction gig with Echelon Front. Now, I've spent a third of my career at training commands, so because you just can't do it at a SEAL team. The way we have our progression set up, you just won't be able, you can't promote that way, and you would just burn out if it was cycle after cycle after cycle. So I was really lucky in that when I wasn't at a SEAL team, I was at our training detachment. So I did basically my whole career of the Naval Special Warfare Group 1 claimancy. It's the 06 command that all the West Coast SEAL teams are under. And so when I wasn't at a SEAL team, I was attachment training other SEALs to get ready to deploy, not in our selection course, screaming at students and making them hit the surf, but training guys getting ready to deploy it. And the awesome aspect of that is that when you have to teach something, you really, really learn it. Then you also, when you're teaching it, you can see the mistakes that other folks are making, and you can learn from those mistakes because most of them are making the same over and over again, and so that helps you out as you move forward as well. But I've been doing this for 2 years.
That's fantastic. I couldn't think of a better person to teach the average person leadership skills than a chief. Like that makes perfect sense. Every RSM, every sergeant major I've ever known is that there's a mentality to it, right? Especially for teaching, and it is, you have the experience behind you. Whatever the words that you use and the way which you speak to people, there is a gravitas there that is like really effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must be something that I'm doing subconsciously but I think it does come across, like you said, with all the leadership, and then it comes across as well. When you genuinely want to see people do better, like I was interested in growing better SEALs and making sure they were better. The guys who took my spot as I passed the torch back would do better than me, and that comes across, and people are willing to take more about what you're trying to teach them when they know that you wanted to see the best for them
Yeah.
and the organization as a whole.
Yeah. How was your transition? Because I mean, you had a week, right? Like that's not much of a transition to come from the military into a civilian company dealing with people.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really in a civilian company. I work with Jocko Willink and JP Donnell and Dave
Yeah.
Burke and all these guys who are ex-military, uh, and and like Mike Scully, Steve Ward, and I knew and Leif Babin knew all these guys for going back to 2005 for a lot of them, back to 1993 for Jocko. So that was easy. But here's the deal: the transition, unless something really crazy happens, it's a slow motion train wreck. You see it coming a mile away. And so I started planning for my transition 3 years before my retirement because I'm like, this is how I'm going to do 30 years and I'm getting out.
Yeah.
So, like, I wouldn't go outside the wire in Afghanistan or Iraq without doing proper planning. And you just don't get ready for a transition without doing the same plan. So it was fairly seamless. And I was lucky in that I didn't lose my peer group because, at Echelon in the peer group. And I think that's what a lot of folks struggle with the most is typically when they leave the military, now they've lost their peer group and they maybe probably move away from the military base they've been on. And they start to feel a little bit of isolation, no boomer. Now firemen and police will understand that kind of sick military sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, people won't laugh at the same jokes. They'll get uncomfortable and shift from one way to the other, and so that's weird. So it wasn't hard for me to find a group of friends that got that sense of humor that challenged me, and so I think that's what a lot of folks need to do is be aware that's going to happen and then be ready to build yourself a new peer group.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I always say, get involved in the community, like your veteran community, your military community, wherever you go. Especially here in Canada, it's a lot harder because we have a very small military, and
Mhm.
when we move like there's only so many bases you can go to. So like you're either in Alberta or you're in Ontario or you're on the East
Uh-huh.
Coast or on the West Coast. So if you live anywhere outside of those normal areas, you're gone. To the military, to your
Yep.
peer group, you are basically on the moon. And I know guys that went out to like northern Manitoba where there is no military presence whatsoever, and they experience the exact same thing that you were saying, that the isolation and depression leads in from after that, and then you start dealing with no one knows you, no one knows how to talk to you. There's a definite issue there. And planning, just like in anything, especially military wise, it's everything we do, right? Every time you make a plan, you need
Mhm.
at least 3 COAs. Every time you set it, do up a set of orders, it's to the minute, to the second, even. Like it is detailed and oriented to what it is you want to do. And unfortunately, I think a lot of guys get out as as like an escape, right? And then they just like, I need to get out of the military, and they just leave. And there's no plan, there's no setup, there's no even mission forward or way to advance. It's extremely challenging. So I
Yeah.
get it's very absolutely true that planning is key. Now, if you were to give somebody one item, like if you were to talk to yourself 3 years ago, was there anything that you missed? Anything that a small detail that you wish you would have known?
No.
No. Nice.
No, I mean, I be with where I'm at now, so I made myself wonder on, okay, here's my retirement date. And then I backed up from it and I was like, I need to do all these medical appointments. I need to make sure this is squared away financially. This one I need to put my house on the market so I can California. All these things. So all that laid out pretty well. I'm really happy with how things have turned out so far. Um, but my advice to anyone else is, and like you talked about, the folks I think that have trouble with the military, the ones that just like they're tired of being told to, so they don't really realize how good they had it in the military until they get out, and
Oh
then
yeah.
all of a sudden they're like, wait, they paid me to go work out. And, was it really that big a deal that I had to drag a razor across my face or get a hair? Probably not. And so there's kind of that shock and realization and isolation that they're feeling when they're out there. But the, the key to that is you'll find other people that you share common interests with, like you said, get involved with, even if they're not military. There's wildland firefighters, there's police, there's folks that are working, on oil rigs where it's negative, and that's not a job for the faint of heart. And they're probably someone that you can find some common ground with, and then build your group out of that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And a lot of those guys are usually ex-military anyway. So, construction and
Sure.
police and fire, and these guys are, most of the guys I know that got out when we were still in Afghanistan was they went to the rigs. So they were working the oil rigs all over
Mm-hmm.
the place. And I know, and those are great paying jobs, or you're, again, the peer group is the same. It's a dark kind of humor. You're already isolated. And it's a pretty masculine job anyway, so there's a nice transition there, right? There's no issues in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. But the one thing that I especially had issues with when I first got out, and I had a diagnosis of PTSD and depression, all this other stuff, was just being able to manage people, because that just drove me fucking nuts. And the thing that I eventually kind of came to realize was that I was the minority, right? Like, I had to, there was
Yeah.
a conscious shift in my head where I said, okay, well, there's only like maybe a million serving and veterans in Canada, and there's 34 million people here. So like, the way I did things is not the way everybody does stuff. So I can't uh, push that onto other people. Do you ever, I know you went directly kind of into your own peer group. Have you seen any other members have that kind of an
Yeah.
issue?
Well, sure, that's real common because, you you show up on time when you say you're going to be somewhere and you're doing better than 80% of the people, right?
Yeah.
I I think in the area that I live, because I live in a real rural area, that people have a great work ethic, and for the part, I'm not disappointed in most of my neighbors. But yeah, there's one of those things to understand what's under the scope of your control and realize that most things you can't control how other people behave. So you have the ultimate freedom in that you can react however you want. And that kind of mindfulness, and really it's just studying stoicism, is what helped me deal with a lot of my temper issues and PTSD and things like that.
Yeah, stoicism has been really fascinating. Actually, I didn't know anything about it until um, I actually started listening to Jocko's podcast, and I think somebody mentioned it on there, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And I read the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I started actually diving
Mhm.
into it, and I was like, "Oh, wow!" Like, it's it's so obvious too. A lot of the points you're just like, "Well, yeah, I can't control anybody else's. Uh, I can't control anybody." Like, that makes perfect sense, but logically you can understand it, but emotionally it's a whole nother ball of wax, right? And it's so
Yeah.
important to be able to control your own emotions, because, well, I mean, you're the only, it's you, right? And I had a conversation with a
Mhm.
corrections officer a while back. I think it was episode 6, and we talked about just like anger as an emotion and how toxic it is in your own in your own body, and it actually, like, it affects your heart, and it affects your musculature, and there's so many things that it can actually affect negatively. Um, but a lot of people don't understand how, right? Like, why is managing your temper so important? For me, it's just so that I don't lose my shit on my kids, or I don't get into a fight outside, right? But why do you think it's so important for even the average person to just really have a hold on their own temper?
Well, there are things that anger does for you that in certain situations could be helpful. Like your ability to withstand pain is probably better when you're angry. I think you're probably stronger when you're angry, but you're also cognitively impaired because your body shifted gears
Mm-hmm.
into what it's trying to do. So you're not really capable of some really good strategic decisions in the moment. And then the fact that you get angry, you're spiking your cortisol, which is a stress hormone that is not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when it's spiked all day, and it wasn't until on Taco podcast they brought this up, and they also brought it up on Marcus Aurelius talks about this, where not being able to control weakness. And so when you temper, that's not weak. And you should do your best to have your emotions at all times so that you can think clearly.
Absolutely. It, it's such a key thing too, because I found a lot of, especially kids, aren't taught how to manage their own temper. And I mean, I do it with my boys pretty regularly when they start to get frustrated and start to get, you know, uh, start to have a breakdown. I tell them, okay, well, we'll just stop, deep breaths, big deep breath in, big deep breath out. Okay, let's stop and think. What is the issue? Why are you frustrated? Like, get to the root of it, and just really detach from the emotion of it, and just, okay, logically think, how do we move forward, how do we solve this problem? But for me, it was a lot different because I'm talking to myself, right? And I can I can rail on myself pretty good when you really want
Mm-hmm.
to. And I'm a pretty logical person, and I needed to find the root, like what it was that really bothered me to the point that I was losing my temper. And eventually what I found out for myself was it was control. Because for an engineer, everything we do is about control. Anytime you're dealing with explosives, it is control the site, control the environment, control the explosive itself. Like, it's control. And when you have kids, they are not in your control. And so a lot of times when I would lose my temper, it was solely of the point that I had no control over the situation. And it took me a long time to realize that, but once I did, I was like, that's why I'm getting bothered by my kids running off in the middle of the street without looking, right? Because I'm not in control of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, really finding the root cause of it. What is it that's really bothering me that causes me to lose my temper? Did you have something similar to that? Is there like a key, a root for you that would cause you to get that agitated back in the day?
Yeah, uh, even now, I mean, it's a never-ending struggle trying to control my temper, and the one thing that I found was super helpful is just being mindful of when I was getting fired up
Mm-hmm.
and beginning to lose my temper or get angry, and so then once I was able to assess what those physiological signs are, like my thought loops that'll start happening when I'm getting angry. I'll start whitening up the steering wheel. I can feel my face flush out, and then I can take a step back and have that internal dialogue that you're talking about. Say, why am I mad? And let's just take traffic is a classic one that gets me fired up. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, why am I mad? Well, because that person in front of me clearly was enough time for all of us to make it through, and now I'm going to have to sit through a whole cycle of lights. And then I can go, well, the internal dialogue goes, is there anything you can do about it? Nope. Yep, I'm comfortable inside my car. I have some nice music or a podcast I'm listening to, so it's no big deal. And then I can let go of where that emotion was taking me. Where it used to be, I would get fired up, I wouldn't realize it, and it would just carry me away because I had never occurred to me and I didn't have any tools in my toolbox on how to calm down. And breathing is a great one.
Yeah.
Pacing your breathing and making sure that you breathe with your diaphragm and you're breathing through your nose is a great one to help you calm down. It's great. The public school my kids go to, their PE teacher teaches them, and I think it's actually part of the curriculum, which I'm thankful for, because they give them a lot of tools on, emotional maturity, and they'll attend count or practice breathing, when they lose their temper. So hopefully they'll be light years in front of them as far as managing their emotions, because it's difficult to manage.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't realize that if you don't make that connection that losing your temper is weak, it's really hard not to temper. Once you make that connection, then you're like, oh, okay, it is not virtuous to lose your temper. The direction I need to go in is having control of everything. And so how can I get that done?
Yeah. I think a lot of it also, it's easy, right? It's easy to get angry. And for a lot of people, when you get angry, others will back off, right? Whoa, okay, calm down. And you all of a sudden have power now. And so I can see the connection there growing up, right? If you started to get really agitated, like I was always a really tall, skinny guy. It wasn't until I was in the military where I actually put on any weight. So I got bullied a lot when I was younger. And I was in martial arts, so I would, whatever, cool. People do whatever you want to. But I had this, my temper would just it would just start to nag at me, right? And I would try and put it off, but I wouldn't actually deal with it. I would just be like, and I'd be angry for a long period of time. And then finally I would snap, right? And I would lose it. And then all of a sudden everybody would go, whoa, okay, this guy who is normally calm is not calm anymore. And then I recognized, oh my God, I have power using this anger, but you're not actually utilizing it, right? Like you are being used by your anger. And it's the idea that it is a weakness to let that go. And I found, being able to find those triggers, as you said, like, really when you're sitting in traffic and you're just like, that motherfucker was on his phone. I bet he was on his phone. How? And you're just like, whoa. Okay. Is that going to help? Like, am I doing anything right now? And traffic for me, same thing. It always riles me up. But like driving behind somebody and they're doing 80 in 100 zone, and you're just like, just come on, man, like just go. But being able to recognize them, is the first step, obviously, and then mitigate them. Actually talk them through in your head and go, okay, what is the real issue? Like, how late am I going to be? Did I give myself enough time? And really, as I've heard many times before, and I think it was in, I think it was on the Jocko podcast as well, but right, like it's your fault, right? Like if you are running late, it's not the person in front of you's fault that is going to make you late. You're already running late. You're the one that did that. If traffic comes out and there's an accident or something like that, well, you can't control that. Why are you getting angry about it, right? Like it's pretty silly. But for me, once there's two levels for me, and there's once I've already lost it, like I'm already pissed off, I'm already angry, and then I realize I'm pissed off, and I go, oh shit, I'm really pissed off. And I used to, this happens every once in a while now, but I have better tools to manage it. But I would get into what I call a rage spiral, and I would be angry at something, and then I would realize that I'm getting angry about that thing, and go, what the fuck? That's stupid. I shouldn't be getting angry about that. And I would get angry at the fact that I'm getting angry, and then I'd get angrier, and then you get angrier, and it just like, and it just riles you right to the peak, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, what I had to do in those rage spirals was just like segregate. Like the moment I realized I was in that, I was just like, I'm done, and I'd have to walk off and try and
Mm-hmm.
manage the emotion from there. Anything for you? For what do you do when you're already pissed off? You've already lost control. What are your go-tos?
Yeah, so I fall prey to what those things, those negative thought loops, where I'll just come back to something and keep coming back to it, and have difficulty letting it go. And so the first step is to identify that you're in a loop, and then have discussion to see if it's worth being angry about, and it's always not worth being angry about. And then I find it helpful to exercise some gratitude. And by that, I'll mean, well, you know what? Yeah, it's rough right now, but guess what? I'm not on the Bataan Death March,
Yeah.
or I'm not in a gulag, or I'm not in, um, a concentration camp, or on the Eastern Front. There are so many examples out there of that you can look at, if any reading at all about history, where people have it like hundreds of
So much worse. Yeah.
than you do. And so really, when you come down to it, you're like, yeah, first world problems.
Yeah.
I'm good to go.
Yeah. Gratitude is such a great
So
great tool.
yeah, it's a sense of appreciation is one of the pillars of good health, I think. I don't think I know it. I'll say there's at it from different directions that we can say it's a truth. You get good exercise, good sleep, good diet, and then you got a sense of appreciation. You're probably in a pretty good spot as a
Yeah.
human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I again couldn't agree more. The big thing for me, at least, I had to practice those, right? Like it's not something that you can just kind of, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna be gracious from now on and just call it a day, right? That's a skill set. You have
Yeah.
to work it, right? And I liken it
Mhm.
to um, your immediate actions, your stoppages and immediate actions, right? You may
Mhm.
know how to do a stoppage drill, sure, but unless you drill that over and over and over and over again, when you actually do have a stoppage, like you need to know how to do it. And it's not, sorry, you don't need to know how to do it. You need to be able to do it without thinking about it. And it seems the idea of having gratitude or being able to recognize when you're in a spiral, that is a practiced skill. And it takes a
Mhm.
long time, and you got to be ready to fail. That's the other part of it, right? Like, because it's not going to work every time. It might work half of the time. So for the first little bit, it might work a quarter of the time for the first little bit, but it's like the grind. It's the same thing as doing your IAs and stoppages. You're going to sit there and go, why am I still doing this? Oh my God, dropping your mag, clearing the chamber. Okay, put a new mag in. Blah, blah, blah. It gets to a point where you're like, this is getting kind of dumb. But it's in those reps that you get the skill. Um, and I think it's
I
such
mean,
a,
listen, the
go ahead.
the perspective is a huge aspect of that aspect of it too. I mean, for most of us, we haven't ever really suffered. So you really don't have that great a perspective of how good you actually have it,
Oh yeah.
because you haven't been to the bottom. So I think it's really important that in order to get that perspective, people are studying their history, or at least reading these books. Like last year we got questions on Echelon in Front, where people were there, oh, my teenage daughter, it's her senior year and they're not going to have a prom because of COVID, and she's really upset. That's cool. Here, hand her this copy of the Diary of Anne Frank and have her
Mm-hmm.
read it. Let's talk about it. And then, you know, no one has those kids aren't hiding in an attic for a year and a half trying to avoid getting concentration camp, so they just don't know. And we as adults, we haven't had those experiences either.
Yeah.
We can You can learn a lot from reading about stuff that really happened, even if you don't have a way to anchor how bad that factor is. But perspective, when Jocko started doing the real dark cast, he started with, I think it was the Machete seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and then he did when he did the My Lai massacre and the cover of that book about that massacre in Vietnam. I had to pull over twice because I was crying listening to that, because I was so horrified and embarrassed that this is something that Americans did, because I always thought we were the good guys. But the reality is people are people, and we all have the potential inside of us to turn into horrible monsters.
Yep.
But listening to those stories made me appreciate that much more, that I'm raising my children in a safe place and there's no war, any of that stuff. And so that's important, and that's a big tool. That's a big tool that I think everybody should do, is you should look at some of these really horrible events that have happened so you can have some appreciation for how good you have it.
Absolutely. And a lot of veterans really understand poverty better because usually where we get stationed is not the nicest places, right? We don't get deployed to Tahiti to go hang out on the beach, right? Like that doesn't happen. You go to the desert, you go to Eastern Africa, you're going to not the holiday spots that we want to go to. So we have a firsthand view of it. And I found when I got home and I had this mentality of like, man, these people just don't get it. And over time, and with some therapy and some help from my therapist, I eventually got to the realization that they don't need to actually understand, like they don't have to have experienced it to really understand it, but they have to be willing to make the connection. And for that, I mean, most people don't know what it's like to get shot at. Like, it's not a great feeling hearing that crack go right beside your ear and you're just like, well, shit, it's on now. Most people don't have that experience, but most people do know what it's like to be afraid, right? And they know what it's like to be to have that adrenaline spike. And that when you can find those connections, when you can go, okay, well, it's similar to this, it's just like way above it, then you can empathize. You won't truly understand, but you can empathize. And studying history has been a big one. I've been a student of history since I was little, and that has taught me so many lessons about life in general, and to be gracious for what we have. I actually just recently, this last year, my son's school asked me to do a video for Remembrance Day. And I was like, absolutely, yeah, no problem. And one of the things I said in it was that the whole reason we have Remembrance Day is so that we can realize how good we have it. And I mean, there were kids that were 8 or 9, I believe, looked about 8 or 9 overseas. And there was the first time they were going to school ever. Little girls that were going in Panjway. And I was like, that's fantastic, right? I looked at that and I smiled and I'm like, we're doing a good job here. This is excellent work. And that they still had to worry about whether or not there were bombs on the road to get to school. My kids don't even, like, that's not even a realization that could be possible for my kids. And I am so thankful for that because I don't want them to have to experience it. But by reading about it, by hearing about it, by being introduced to the topic, they can empathize. They can have a little touch of what it's like. And like you said, doing the My Lai massacre, the Machete season 1 was brutal. I actually had to pause that a couple of times and just like calm down, because I was just getting really emotional about that one. It was was a very challenging one to sit through as a whole podcast. I can't even imagine trying to record that, let alone trying to read it, take notes, and then record it. and like, it just, that's a bit outside of my range. But again, the key thing is like, you get introduced to it. And it's the same thing we did in training, right? We do stress inoculation. You don't just take a random brand new guy from basic and throw him into a full battle group assault with tanks and planes and labs running around shooting 25 mils and platoons running all over the place. That would be overwhelming for most people. You start off with pairs, blank. Get them introduced to the weapon, right? Get them introduced to moving with somebody else. Get them introduced by communicating with each other, and then advance from there. And I think one of the key things is, once you get to a point where you can calm yourself down from already being angry, that next stage, that going from pairs to section live, is being able to recognize it while you're getting angry, right? And being able to see it before you go over the top and going, oh, whoa, okay, I need to calm down. And then having multiple tools, right? Like, we don't just have one reload drill, right? You got your basic reload, you got your bolt fully forward, bolt fully rear, bolt halfway forward, you got a stovepipe. Like, there's all kinds of drills for basically the same problem. Your gun doesn't shoot. Okay, well, how do you fix it? And I think with temper and anger and stuff like that, we really got to practice all those tools. You got to have multiple routes, as we were saying earlier. And, you know, what do you do? So for yourself, what are your go-tos when you start to get agitated? What are the things that you utilize the most to backtrack yourself or mitigate in the process?
Okay, let's break it down by the numbers. Step 1 is identify that I'm losing my temper. Step 2 is to have that internal dialogue that asks myself, is this worth getting over? Step 3 is typically, it's not, control your breathing, and then have a sense of appreciation for what you have. And then this mental toughness is something that I practice, in that I get really fired up when I'll have discussions about, I have very clear views on what I think have to do with personal responsibility and, you know, ways of life. I get really annoyed when I see people trying to shirk their responsibility. And I need to be able to look at that, and I'll look at, like, specifically social media is great for this, because you can go see all the people's posts that completely are diametrically opposed to you on whatever your political scale is.
Yep.
Look at what they're saying, and then for that little kernel of truth in it. Because there's some, you know, no matter what, there's some valid point that they're making, even though they're at the other side, and how you can adjust and improve your thinking. Because if you're not adjusting the way you look at the world, then you've lost your humility and you're unable to grow. And one thing I realize now, I don't have all of them to prove. And I think that's the cornerstone of what humility is. A lot of people mistake humility for meekness, and it's not meekness. It's well, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers, and this is how I vote, and this is what my core beliefs are, but maybe they could be adjusted. And I don't know what someone else's life experiences are. And I can project what I think my life experience on them, but that's not fair generalization. It doesn't work. It's not a mature way to look at things. So there you have it. Like, those 3 steps: identifying that I'm losing my temper, and I do that by looking at whatever the red flags are that let me know that that's happening. Number 2, look whether or not, you know, it's worth losing my temper over. And number 3 is, you know, getting that sense of appreciation. And I exercise that. I do the immediate act we're talking about, instead of waiting around for someone to come up to me with the completely opposite opinion or something that's going to piss me off. I'll go look for it.
Yep.
and I'll do my rep just when I'm surfing Facebook or Instagram, and I'll look at what people are saying, and specifically, not not my cognitive biases, but people that are at the other side of the spectrum, see what they're saying, and see, well, is there any kernel of truth to that? and and really pay attention to how I react so that I can do that crucial debrief at the end of that session to make myself better next time. And it's like you said, you just have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it, but you have to add that debrief portion in the
Yep.
end where you're humble enough to say, okay, this is where I could do better. And this is where I think the military, we really have a leg up given our life experience and everybody, because that's how we operate. We go out and do these drills. And then when it's all over, we go, all right, team, what do we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we do it better next time? And we constantly adjust and adjust and adjust. And the battlefield changes so fast because no one wants to die. You don't want to die. The enemy doesn't want to die. So that means they're constantly changing their tactics and techniques. And seeing that on the battlefield, you're like, oh, they just adjusted. And now, unless I want to die, Darwin has been in fat there. I've got to adjust how I'm going to react to their adjustment. And it keeps happening. It keeps happening. Framework, I think those of us in the military have a real leg up on understanding that, because in the civilian world, things just don't happen that fast.
Yeah.
COVID has put pressure on our whole system that's causing at a really fast level. And when we come out the other side of this, we're better off for it. No, it's a real slow procedure, and you can kind of get away with not improving and still get by. But to do that,
Yeah, I find
you have to briefing. Go ahead, Chance. Sorry.
no, I'll go to I find the civilian market, from what I remember when I was working the civilian before I was in the military, a lot of people are very okay with the status quo, right? There, if everything is working, cool, just leave it there, right? And I take, I'm the same way. I take like almost offense to the idea of being okay with not changing. That just, it throws my brain. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to learn and evolve and change and develop and grow. I used to work for this video game company years and years and years ago, and we just like sold video games and stuff. But the owner, he had a set, this is the way things are. Nothing is changing. We're not advancing. We're not going to change the way we do things, period. End of discussion. And him and I butted heads constantly because I was a salesman, and I'm like, if we want to sell more stuff, we need to be able to adjust and, play the system a little bit and move here, do this, shuck this way, whatever, and, play the market rather than just assuming that the market's going to come to us. And once I got in the military and everyone's like, okay, we're going to do this operation, and then we're going to have an AAR after, and what's your opinion, Sapper Burles? And I'm like, I don't know. I think we did well. And it wasn't until I was a corporal where I was actually looking for things to talk about. And I was looking for like things to advance, and how do I get better, and how do we change this? And it's such a mindset shift as well, right? Like to be able to go from being okay with the way things are to wanting things to change, even if it's good right now, just still wanting things to change. And I was reading, did you ever read the book On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman?
No.
You should. It's an excellent book.
He's come and spoken at Group 1 a couple times, and it's always great stuff, but I haven't had a chance to run combat. And he got On Killing as well.
Yeah, On Killing was great from a psychological aspect of it, and then On Combat was like the physiological effects of stress. So you get, like, if you read them both, you get this really great large view of it. I was reading On Combat when I was in Afghanistan, and it was fed the things that were happening afterwards. I was reading about in the book, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's why that happened. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then
Yeah.
I was able to manage them a little bit easier. But one thing that really got me on that was he was talking about the sheepdog, the range of people. You know, you got 1% are wolves and 1% are sheepdogs, and you got 99%, and it's a spectrum in between, right? And people will
Mhm.
shift and move and blah, blah, blah. And I took that to heart in everything, is that it's all a spectrum, right? If I want to get better in anything, I'm going to be, if like my fitness right now is not as good as it should be, well, I'm on the lower end of a spectrum. That means I need to be able to move myself up the spectrum to get better. If I want to, you know, get better at podcasting or get better at jujitsu or do anything, I'm already at the low end of the spectrum. But now that I'm changing or I'm wanting to change, I'm slowly moving myself along that spectrum. And especially for temper wise, that's something that we have to do. If we want to manage our temper, we have to realize first off that we are not where we want to be, and then make the adjustment from there. I had a podcast I just did a couple weeks ago on inertia, in that when you start moving, that initial change, when you go from a standstill to movement, it is really hard. And that first few steps of trying to manage your temper aren't going to work, and they're not going to be easy, and it's going to make you hate wanting to change, but they have to be done, right? And then once you get moving and you start to see progress, it's a little bit easier, and you keep moving and it's a little bit easier, and then you keep moving and it's a little bit easier. But I really think the key thing that, you know, we both keep going on is having the humility to say, I need to change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no improvement happens inside your comfort zone. And people typically, the status quo is comfortable. It's predictable. It's not scary. It's not new. There, I don't think there's that much opportunity to fail. And so that they stay in that box. And to do any improvement, you have got to get out of that box.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're getting close to an hour now. I just wanted to see if you have got any final points, got any little tidbits of information for us that we haven't crossed over yet.
Yeah. Another aspect I'd like everybody to think about is to approach the world from a sense of kindness. It takes the greatest strength to respond to a frown with a smile. And where we should practice being at is being stronger and more kind with one another. At a time right now in my country, US, it's really polarizing and people are pulling further apart. And just because we have different opinions doesn't make us enemies. All of us have basically the same aspirations. We want to be able to spend with whomever we love and be treated fair and equitably for whatever we want to do, and have a good, safe place to live. The other tiny stuff that we're arguing about right now is really small, and the only way we're going to fix anything is by having conversations with folks. And so there's this guy that I discovered via Joe Rogan. The guy's name's Daryl Davis. He's a black man, and he got 200 folks to leave the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know what you're
And
talking
he
about.
didn't do it by sticking his finger in their eye. You know, it's like, okay, well, if anyone has a right to be angry with the Klan, it's black people.
Yeah.
And instead, he approached it from curiosity, and apparently you can't be curious and angry at the same time. And so he engaged these Klan members, and he started with like this guy was like a grand cyclops or something. I'm not sure how their
Yeah.
competency architecture was in the Klan, but it was a really bad guy that was a leader in the Klan, and he engaged the guy in conversation and kept engaging him and became friends with the guy. And so at one point, the guy's like, well, shoot, Daryl is a good dude. My ideology has got to be off. And he left the clan. And that's how we're going to get some improvement and progress moving forward. It's not by screaming at each other or calling names. It's having open and honest discussions, and you have to believe in your heart that the other person is doing the best that they can. So I think that if we approach the world with the concept of having a employing some empathy, that we'll make it a better world for us to pass on to our kids. And yeah, that's it. Probably not the touchy-feely thing you thought a retired Navy SEAL would tell you, but these are the conclusions I've come to after a life of violence.
Well, that's the thing is I find there's this, I've said this a couple times to a lot of my buddies. We have this this veteran renaissance going on right now. We have a whole generation of people who have been to war and have come back and aren't afraid anymore. Right? We have people starting businesses, and people doing art, and people making knives, and people making like all kinds of crazy stuff, which is fantastic. And I think it starts with the fact that we aren't afraid anymore. And you know what? I think it was Jordan Peterson was saying that you know I just forgot the quote. You know, a strong man isn't someone who doesn't appreciate or has no skill in violence. It's someone that has that under check. I can't remember the exact quote, but the point is, right, like we are comfortable with violence, but we have that under voluntary control, right? We're not just going off, flying out the handle, ripping off people. And I think that's one of the great things about this last generation is that we're now open to all of these things, right? I know I got my mom's side of the family are all hippies, like super left-wing hippies, and my dad's side of the family are all ranchers, and I got my army bros who are all like even farther on that scale, and I kind of sit in the middle and I just listen to everybody, and I'm like, cool, man, like you got some cool viewpoints and they got some cool viewpoints, and I'm just going to teach my boys how to be good men. And then after that, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I try to live my life the same way I did when I was in Afghanistan, and that, you know, I'm going to do what I can to find an IED, but if I find it the wrong way, it's not my problem anymore. So why worry? Right.
Yeah.
There's no point in flipping around. So now if anybody doesn't know you, or hasn't following you, how would they find you social media wise?
I'm on Instagram at jason.n.gardner, and on there I post like a mix of war stories and, you know, kind of the homesteading lifestyle that I'm living now, and my thoughts on parenting, pictures of my kids. And then if anyone's interested in doing anything through Echelon Front, you can find us at echelonfront.com.
Which is fantastic. I can't wait till you guys' first muster up north one day. I'm definitely going to be there, but it's a little bit outside of my price bracket just to fly to most of the places you guys do it. So
Sure.
I can't wait though. I'm really stoked. I've been following you guys for a while now, and I think one of the key things, I wish we could bring Echelon Front into National Defense Headquarters, teach the guys out in Ottawa how to actually lead instead of being the having the issues that we do here in our military, because it starts from the top, right? And you got to work your way down. If you're not the example, this is one of the things I found out as an instructor. If you're not the example, then who else is going to be, right? It's going to, like, all the recruits are looking at you going, who's this fucking guy? If you don't hold the line, no one else will. That's going to be it, right? And I got into the veteran advocacy community very early on, once I got out of the military and got calm. And it's that same thing. I thought there was going to be this Paragon tier 1 special forces dude's going to come down from the hill and be like, all right, boys, this is where we're going. Follow me. And And I was like, I realized that person doesn't exist. Like the perfect ideal soldier isn't going to just show up and take us on a path. It's got to be you. You're the only person leading you, so it's got to be you. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for being on here, Jason. This has been just a fantastic conversation. I'm so stoked. I'm already more motivated than I was before we
Awesome.
started.
Thanks, John.
That concludes this episode of The Toolbox. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you were able to use some of the information that was offered. I want to thank all those putting it on the line for us every day: military, veterans, first responders, and public servants. Keep up the good work. I look forward to bringing you more tools for your toolbox. And until next time, stay open, stay humble, and stay focused. Chimo.